Now that Dan Hurley is back, again, I said, to me, he's number one in terms of my coaches' rankings. Rick Pitino would be number two. I mean, he has 10 more NCAA tournament appearances than the next closest coach in the conference. He has 5 more Final Fours than the next closest coach in the conference. His resume speaks for itself, and I still think he's a very good basketball coach. We'll see if he's able to consistently put together the right type of roster with this new way of doing things, if there will be that chemistry within the locker room and all that, because they are kind of going about it in a mercenary fashion, the way a lot of teams are right now. Marquette may be the only team that's not doing it that way. But Rick Pitino still, in my opinion, clearly number one or number two in this conference. I would put him at number two. After that, it gets a little bit more difficult for number 3 and 4, but I think Sean Miller is pretty clear cut as the number 3 coach in the conference. He has, I guess you could make the argument maybe for Greg McDermott. Some people may feel more strongly about McDermott in his recent history, but they have the same amount of NCAA tournament appearances. They both have been there 12 times. McDermott has a few more years of experience than Sean does, especially with Sean sitting out the year. But Sean has 5 more Sweet 16s and 3 more Elite Eights than Greg McDermott does. It's kind of hard to put McDermott above Miller when you look at what they've done, especially in the NCAA tournament. And honestly, I think there's a pretty strong argument for Sean regardless of that. So again, Dan Hurley 1, Rick Pitino 2, Sean Miller 3, and then Greg McDermott 4 for me. After that, this is where it really starts to get jumbled up and it gets more difficult in my opinion. I think you could make a lot of arguments different ways. Shaka Smart is who I had at number 5. I'm fascinated to see how things go for Shaka Smart without Tyler Kolek and with this new transfer portal approach. Because obviously we have VCU Shaka Smart where he makes that Final Four run, and you can argue it's a fluke or not, but it happened, and it's not easy to make a Final Four for anybody, and he did it with a mid-major program. You have to give him credit for that. But then he really struggled from there at multiple programs. I mean, he was at Texas and didn't do a whole lot. So it's understandable that people kind of lost some confidence in him and didn't feel as strongly about his coaching chops. But then he gets to Marquette, and it feels like a perfect fit. And he gets Tyler Kolek via the transfer portal. Now, I don't know that he or anybody in his staff knew what Tyler Kolek was going to be. In fact, I know they didn't, because there's no way you could have known that he was going to be a potential National Player of the Year candidate. But he made a huge difference. And kind of lightning in the bottle situation again. It's unfair to just say everything Shaka Smart has done, given that he's done at multiple programs at multiple levels, is a fluke. But again, you kind of have the VCU thing, which was weird. And now you have this situation where you had Tyler Kolek, and it's like, can you replicate that? Can they be the same type of team? They've really changed their offense since Kolek got there. And he and Oso Ighodaro was a big part of making that offense work. Can they continue to play that way without those guys? Can Shaka Smart continue the sort of revival of his career? I'm fascinated to see that, because again, right now I would have him at 5th in the conference, but I could listen to arguments either way. A lot of that's going to depend on what the next few years look like for him. Then right after him is, my opinion, the hardest coach to rank. And that's Butler's Thad Matta. Because if you're basing it on what he's done and his ability to X and O in a huddle and his experience as a head coach, I think you probably really value Thad Matta, and you might have him even higher than 6th in the conference. I mean, certainly given what he's done, he's been to 4 Elite Eights, 2 Final Fours. That's significant compared to some of these other guys. But at the same time, you have to think about the gap in between when he was most successful in his career, where he's at currently, and how the game has changed since then. And the big question mark now for Thad Matta is, can he put together the type of roster via recruiting that you need to compete at the top level of the Big East and across the country? I'm not saying he can't, but that's the reason I would have him down at 6, given that he's been to multiple Elite Eights and Final Fours. To round out my list, and we're going to bring in our guest next, I have Ed Cooley right under Thad Matta at 7th. I have Chris Holtman 8th. Then I have Shaheen Holloway, Kim English, and Kyle Neptune 9th, 10th, and 11th. Now, there can be arguments certainly about what Shaheen Holloway is going to be as a head coach and what Kim English is going to be as a head coach. And I'm not necessarily going to make a strong argument against them. But at this point in their careers, given what they have done, there's just not enough NCAA tournament success yet for either of those guys, or in Kim English's case, even an appearance, to really speak of. You can't rank them above those other coaches, in my opinion, until they've at least had some NCAA tournament success, given that's what we base pretty much this entire sport on.